Good afternoon. How's the show so far? Interesting keynotes? Pretty exciting stuff. So we're really happy to be here. We're happy that you're here to hear this session. My name is Pete Cruz. I'm with Red Hat in the Ansible business unit. I lead our Ansible cloud offerings go-to-market. I'm joined by Jeffrey Jones of Ticketmaster. He's the director of SRE. He's been working with us in the team for a little bit and leveraging Ansible through AWS and doing their thing. So I think, to get started, some of the things that we're going to talk about today, one, we'll do a little background. Jeff's going to give us a background on what his team is doing, what they're responsible for, some of the core use cases that they're using Ansible for within their overall environment. And then the question I get from a lot of customers and EBCs or executive briefing centers, et cetera, is, okay, how do I take automation from one team and start to scale it and broaden that across my organization so we can take full effect of the power? If you were in the Ansible keynote, you probably heard from ADP and JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, like very similar conversations on how they actually started to maximize the value of automation within their organization. So Jeff will touch on that. And then we'll kind of wrap up with where are they now? Where's Ticketmaster now, and where do they intend to go? What's next on the roadmap? So without further ado, I think we can get started. So Jeff, really happy for you to be here. It's nice seeing you again. If you can just give folks a background on you, the team, kind of what your responsibilities are, and what's a day in the life of Ticketmaster.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. My name is Jeffrey Jones. I'm a director of site reliability engineering at Ticketmaster. Pete and I actually presented in November at AWS reInvent, but we were in the expo hall and I wasn't sure anyone was listening, but here you guys are right there, so we'll see how this goes. But I'm excited because I'm always excited to talk about the way automation can really transform an organization and bring teams that maybe are getting left behind by some of the cool modern things that are happening, bring everybody along for the ride, and especially upskill those employees along the way. So to give some background on our team, we are part of what we call our Ticketmaster core, which is a part of the company that hosts the back-end systems. We call them our core processing engines. In basic terms, they're highly proprietary databases that are tightly coupled with business logic and really good at doing things like selling tickets really fast. So these systems together are responsible for about 90% of the revenue that comes through Ticketmaster. And as a team of site reliability engineers, we're looking for ways to help our operations team and our engineering teams as they operate these systems together, and how we can reduce toil, how we can improve their uptime and their reliability and things of that nature. So we're responsible for observability, the monitoring and alerting of these systems, improving what's already there. We're responsible for automated software deployments and a number of different things, configuration management being a huge project that we just undertook this last year. So yeah, I think that kind of covers our main.
The main overall, yeah. We spent some time talking about, fortunately here we can expand a little bit more on what you're actually using automation and Ansible for in your organization. And I think we kind of settled in, a lot of folks might use it for, patch management or, configuration or just provisioning of systems. But I think your team has a pretty comprehensive scope as far as the type of use cases you're using Ansible for, but, within your data centers and with the systems your controls. You want to spend a little bit of time kind of talking through the wheel, if you will?
Yeah, one interesting thing about the team that we work with, we have kind of a couple functional areas of platform engineering and site reliability engineering. Ticketmaster has a lot of employees that are well tenured, 20 years, 30 years, that are still there, and they're highly specialized on different tasks, and they bring that responsibility along with them into our SRE organization. So as you see here, we have a broad range of responsibilities that we're using automation for, and we're looking for ways to improve. So the first of that being, I mentioned configuration management, but first deploying our infrastructure in an automated way, using Ansible to do automated configuration management of our Linux systems, whether it be VMs or we have bare metal systems, that we're going through a hardware refresh cycle right now. We've also used it to migrate off of old storage platforms to new storage platforms and get the data there in a reliable way in an acceptable time frame. So that is one of the kind of the bread and butter of the team. But then we are branching out, we have branched out into many other areas. One of the things the automation gives us is just a one-shot view of our infrastructure all in one place. We know where it's at, and then it helps us as we look to improve things like health checks and visibility of what our systems look like. Along with those automated health checks and the custom monitoring that we've done with Ansible, we also are responsible for all sorts of automated processes like archive management, taking daily archives that we're required to take through different regulatory bodies that require those archives exist, and then we upload them into AWS S3 through Ansible. And can't see the rest of them here. Oh, one of the biggest projects I mentioned was the migration of our storage systems. We use NetApp for our storage, and the NetApp integrations that Ansible gives us have been huge for a number of things. We have a custom in-house tool that we've written to interact with the API of NetApp, and then we've created an Ansible module that uses that custom interface for some things. And then as things have matured, the Ansible module itself for NetApp has gotten to a place that we find it extremely useful for a number of tasks as well. So we're able to use those features for disaster recovery and bring down our disaster recovery target times, and also just things like those daily snapshots and daily archives all happening via the NetApp integration.
And so, I think, we also have, compliance and kind of the, automated troubleshooting, right? And kind of tying what you're doing on a day-to-day basis into operations, right? For, how do you detect what's going on in your environment? You want to spend a couple minutes talking about the operation side of it, and then maybe where compliance comes in?
Yes, definitely. It's being tightly coupled with our operations organization. So much of the automation work we've done is leveraged by them. And I mentioned bringing people along for the ride. And that's one of the areas we've really been able to do that. And as we've done that, what we get with this centralized automation is a central place to pull data on what we're doing. It's also, by centralizing the automation, it helped us with compliance by pulling all of the source code into one place, into a single repo. And now you have the audit trail of who approved this change to go into production. A number of things you kind of get for free almost as you centralize automation is you start bringing what SRE is bringing those best ideas of software engineering into our operations. And as you centralize automation, so much of that comes along and it simplifies compliance along the way.
Yeah, it's also a great segue, right? So hearing about centralizing automation at scale across organizations. So really when we start to think about what centralizing and scaling automation for Ticketmaster means, what were your fundamental goals for behind what you were doing with centralizing automation?
Yeah, if we go back a few years to when we were looking at this, we have a fantastic operations organization that has, like I said, there's people that have been doing some of this for a long time, and they've brought all sorts of tooling along with them, tools that have been deprecated, tools that have come and gone, and scripts and languages and all sorts of different ways of automating and doing things. And so we really wanted to simplify the way we did this so that, number one, the engineers could share automation with each other, but number two, it became something that wasn't so intimidating for operations employees to also use and leverage. Because we all know the terror that there is when you type a command and then nothing happens at the command line, right? There's no visibility and you're just sitting there waiting, hoping something's gonna happen. And that fear that we all have in those situations, Ansible or any centralized tool that lets you see what's happening really helps with that. And so I mentioned that because that was the main goal, is let's bring the whole operations organization along with the SRE team and upskill everybody to a point where we're all contributing to automation and making things better rather than being stuck on a treadmill day to day of doing the same tasks.
Yeah, so I guess with any grand initiative or set of goals, right? Like you got to start somewhere. So what was, lessons learned and kind of, how did you actually begin? Like how did you start that process?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think we've all faced it. If I go to my own starting at Ticketmaster, we'll use that as an example, but I was hired during the middle of of a concert series that was, the on-sales were busy, entry to the venues wasn't going well at the time, and my boss was asked to hire some more people to come help out. But he literally couldn't spend 5 minutes to interview me. Like how is he gonna go through this hiring process and all of that? That's how underwater they were. But he finally got through the interviews, and we got to the place where he honed in on a couple candidates, and we joined the company. And then you go start, and this is not a unique story. You start and you get there, and then it's like, what do you want me to do? And it's kind of crickets, right? How are you going to get anyone to tell you what to help with when they're all so busy keeping the systems up? And so the approach I took here, and that others have taken, that really works, is you just have to have an engineer that's curious and ready to start asking questions, and says, I'm here to help, and is ready to convince people that they're here to help by actually doing something right away. So the way to do that is to ask questions to everybody, put time on people's calendars, say, hey, can I shadow you for a day? And you're going to look for the opportunities that you see. You're going to catalog them, you're going to publish them somewhere like Confluence, and then you're going to find a few minutes to bring them to the team. And with that published list, you're going to choose something, and you just start. And it's going to be something simple. You might just find that there's a bunch of cron jobs that are failing, and nobody has time to solve that, right? Something real simple. Or you could bring an Ansible playbook that goes and restarts services that are failing, that people are manually restarting. But you just have to start and build that trust over one little task, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of that point, right? You're busy keeping the lights on and doing your day job, and you're trying to advance and modernize what you're doing from an automation. So it definitely can be challenging. And we tell a lot of our customers, right, start small, right? Start small, pick a set of repeatable tasks that are, bogging you down or in your backlog, nail those down. Yep. And so I guess, once you get started, right, I guess the key point, right, you just got to start at some point. So then, the lesson learned, right? We talked about the starting simple, but I think you touched on it a little bit in the beginning and the goals, right? How do you share? Like, what are your best practices and how you actually got the word out once you started having success in some of those initial initiatives?
Yeah. I think the thing that really helps is keeping, besides just starting, is you want to keep things as simple as you can. And that's why Ansible fit the bill so well for this SRE team. Was we could share it with people. They didn't have to go spend an hour trying to understand your code. They could run it on their own laptop, or you could easily show them what you're doing. And then you want to just pair with others frequently and keep looking for those opportunities to improve, and say, hey, I noticed you were doing this, and so I put this thing together, or would it be helpful if I did this? That's the approach. And it seems funny to stand up here and say, like, just do these simple things, but when you have an engineer who is available like that, it really helps. So you have to either hire somebody or pull somebody out of the day-to-day grind and get them to that point where they can start adding that value. And one of the things that is really important here is you have documentation showing what you're doing and showing your wins, and publishing those, and speaking with people as much as you can to let them know what's going on, and look at this potential of this we have if we just get a few minutes from a few people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's, once you get started, right, and you start that momentum and you start bringing on additional teams, right, I think, getting that platform, getting that automation, together, right? So what were some of the challenges, or at least as you started to go, and what did you learn as, through that, right? Like, because I think some customers might end up getting mired in what they're putting together, a set of tooling, as opposed to actually solving problems. So what were some of the challenges, and how did you overcome those as a team?
I think the challenge that you have in a situation like this is, how do you start contributing and helping others while also creating a framework that you can build on and start inviting them, so you don't recreate the same problem that you already had, that you had teams writing custom probes for a monitoring tool, and you had other teams writing scripts in Perl and others in Bash, and there's no guiding principles. And so the thing that we established from the beginning is our Ansible code was going to be readable, and Ansible helps with that, but you can still write bad Ansible code, right? Or you can not add comments, or you can not add documentation along with it. So readability was the paramount thing over anything else, over efficiency, over whatever cool new thing you learned how to do. Readability is the first thing. And when it becomes readable, it becomes shareable. But the shareability also has the added benefit of you have to centralize somewhere, and you have to get things into source control. So naturally, you're likely going to get things into Git. You're going to go through the process of pull requests and getting more eyes on your work. And that creates a shareable environment, a central environment, and insisting on that. If you have a team that has habits of putting things directly on the machines, directly on your servers, you have to just draw that line in the sand. And if you're a leader, you establish that firm policy that we're not doing that anymore. So you have that readability, that centralized shareability, and then the maintainability kind of comes along with each of those, that now that you've created this framework that people can use, you're going to be sharing this with a broader operations group or an engineering team or a DevOps team. But everybody together then maintains this code, and they can now because it's centralized and it's simple to read, and you can hire somebody off the street and they can come understand what you're doing. So that's the principles that we set, and we have to find ourselves time to time going back and looking at those and saying, wow, these playbooks we've been writing, they're really cool, but we can't hand them to operations because they're pretty convoluted. We just recently had to go through that process, a painful process of a lot of automation we wrote and said, this isn't really the way we should have gone, and go back and correct it. But the dividends pay in that the operations team has been able to do the operating system upgrades that we've been doing without any help from the SRE team, whereas if we hadn't done that, it wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, so you talked in the beginning about some of the use cases around, where you're doing kind of the CI/CD configuration infrastructure as code, right? And that's kind of that next step, that collaboration aspect where you start to work together as a team across the silos, right?
Yeah, so I have config as code and infrastructure as code up here for two reasons. Is one, that's a great area to automate across your infrastructure. But specifically here, what we found was we became reliant on Ansible pretty quickly, and we were using the open source upstream AWX project. And we had a time where our hypervisors went down, which took down our AWX instance, and we could not get it back up. We hadn't even thought about automating or configuration management around that. It took us a couple days to get it back up and running, and we couldn't do any of the great new things we've been advertising we could do. We couldn't do them. So very quickly, our automation became our new toil. We'd been trying to reduce toil, and instead we created more. But AWX and AAP, they have great playbooks and modules for the playbooks to configure them as code. So we got all of our job templates, our inventory, our credentials, all of that into code. And now, with a click of a couple buttons, we have an AAP instance or an AWX instance up and ready to go. And that was a big game changer for us to not be creating a problem that we became dependent on something we couldn't redeploy.
Yeah, it's one of those things we always chuckle about is, don't you have an automation platform to do that for you? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think, now that you've gained steam as an organization, right? You're starting to move forward. You're starting to bring more and more, handling more use cases during that time. So how do you keep it going, right? How do you we talked about continuing on the path, but how do you maintain it? What are your areas for improvement, and what's next on your?
Yeah, as you start to become reliant on a product like this, we said, here come the auditors, right? But my root introduction into this was one day my boss sends me an email and said, oh, by the way, the auditors said you're responsible for this now because you're using it in Ansible, and they have all these questions. And so we had to start documenting like I mentioned earlier, what's going on in Git and how are we doing role-based access controls. And the good thing is with Ansible, AWX or AAP, you have those role-based access controls. You have teams that you can set up and manage those and manage who gets what access to inventory. So a lot of that comes along for the ride as long as you take the time ahead of time to set that up correctly.
Yeah, and again, that compliance aspect of it, right? It's not just what you're putting out, but how are you able to check, validate, and verify that things you said, used to do things directly to devices, right? Imagine that may still happen in some cases, or have you fully locked that down with compliance?
No, it definitely can happen, and you just have to be able to adapt and find areas that are gaps. We have on my team, we have someone who. Or in our area, we have someone who helps us with the audits, and he can kind of help us get ahead of some of that. But yeah, it's always a problem. And the other thing we've done as we talk about how are we going to continually improve this is you have to start to look at, and I mentioned, like, are we still including everybody? Are we bringing everyone along for the ride? And when you're not, what does it take? Do you need to go do some training sessions? Do you need to simplify your playbooks? Do you need to shadow them and see what they're doing, and why is their job not allowing them to come work with you? And as you do that, you'll be amazed as you look back at how far you've come, and especially how far these employees that you're bringing along with you through upskilling, how far they've come. And that's where it's really important to celebrate the progress that you're making. If you have awards internally that you can give, or however it works at your company, find those opportunities to celebrate, because it's intimidating for people to take this kind of upskilling on. Even though Ansible makes it simple, it's still a leap for a lot of people depending on what type of teams you're talking about. So that's an important part of it, is celebrating.
Yeah, I think, the one word that I've heard on almost every one of the slides, the points that we've talked to, right, is share.
Yeah.
Share, and communicate. Communicate just like a community, right? You're building a community of automation, almost like a community of practice within Ticketmaster. And communication and sharing is kind of the heart of open source, kind of the heart of community. And it's a great approach. I mean, it's obviously, we talk about some of the results and some of the value that you've seen, or now that you've kind of embarked on this journey, you've started to centralize, you're kind of getting into hitting the stride as an organization and really adding value to the business. What are some of the results that you've seen?
Yeah, we've had some fantastic results as we were talking about these, or as we were preparing for this presentation, and I looked back and started collecting them. It's actually fun to look back and see. But one of the ones that really built the trust early on was simplifying a deployment process for a low level for an API that we're responsible for. And its deployments used to take the operations team doing it very manually. It would take days to get this fully deployed globally, and even sometimes over the course of weeks, depending how the canary testing would go, and did they have to roll back and things like that. So we got that into playbooks, and we got that down to a one-click deployment per cluster. They watch it, make sure everything's good, and they're done with those deployments in an hour. So it's a legacy system. It doesn't play well with modern CI/CD, and so Ansible fit the bill perfectly to fill some of those gaps. And then we've been able to, we mentioned disaster recovery already, and we've certainly that was a huge one of being able to say, and we did it in a real actual major incident. We failed the system over with this playbook, and it failed over in 10 minutes just like we had promised. We're able to do dry runs of those every quarter and prove that our disaster recovery solution works. And this is a very proprietary system that we had to do the disaster recovery for, and Ansible again just came to the rescue and made that possible. Configuration management modernization. We had a legacy configuration management system from the RHEL and Oracle Linux 5 and 6 days that is end of life, and we had to bring into the modern era, and that was a huge project. But with using Ansible and Ansible roles to manage the configuration, we're able to do that. And again, that's where we brought operations along for the ride, and they've now gone from not having anything to do with provisioning of machines to being completely responsible for it. Over the last several months, we've done literally hundreds and hundreds of machines all through with that team.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, that's when you start to see, like you said, when we step back and start asking the questions, like, so, what has this bought the organization for you? How has it made your life easy? And I think with all things IT, right, our work is never done, right? There's always the next thing, the next technology, the next thing that's coming down the pike, the next business, the next concert, in your case. So I think, where are you right now? I know, you talked about AWX, you've talked about AAP, I know you've made that shift,
Yeah.
So kind of where are you now, and then where do you intend to go? Like, what's next for your SRE team?
Yeah, so we made the shift to AAP as kind of the treadmill of keeping up with the open source upgrades and building a deployment solution for them every time something changed upstream. That became more and more of a burden, and then also just being able to just have the confidence and not have to sit back and go through all the checklists of securing an open source solution like that. So we essentially said we can do that ourselves. So we've been doing it ourselves, or we can pay someone to do it for us. And that was kind of the pitch point that we went in with, and that these are our systems responsible for 90% of our revenue. We need the configuration of them, the configuration management solution to be rock solid, the deployment solutions to be rock solid. So that naturally got us into AAP, and we looked at different options, going on-prem, going in the cloud, and I chose on-prem, and we got pretty far into that, and then the budget dried up, right? As anyone who's had to deal with budget knows that can happen. And we ended up in AWS just because, for that reason of the offering in the AWS marketplace, and who puts what labels on what dollars, that matters at times, right? So we ended up with the AWS version, and we were one of the bleeding edge clients last year with that, and be honest, it was really painful. But we've pushed through it with Red Hat's help. The offering that's in the cloud now has changed to a self-managed solution where you manage your own deployment, which we deploy now through Terraform, and it's turned into a great solution. We're looking now at using the automation mesh that you can use so that our cloud, our AAP in the cloud is able to go into our data centers at single entry points rather than having to open it up everywhere. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things we're just about done with, where we have been rolling that out. And then the big thing we're excited for is the event-driven automation feature of Ansible, or of AAP specifically. We've done a lot of our own event-driven work through playbooks and polling things and checking for conditions, but the way that EDA does that and can help us actively monitor those things through webhooks and help with self-healing is really our next big undertaking that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, right? Like when we talked about some of what you were doing and the checks that you were doing, like you said, with playbooks, and now being able to tap into those monitoring systems. So you said you're using like Prometheus and some other tools that are actually looking at the state of your environment, the performance of that environment. Now you can kind of tap into that instead of recreating that wheel, right?
Yeah, we can use the same Prometheus exporters that we've been using, but with the way that EDA will react to a certain condition and help us self-heal immediately is something that we've been toying with in non-production, and we're getting ready to roll out to production.
And then you see when we talk, you kind of see yourselves. Your team is doing a lot of the playbook creation, et cetera. But I think you mentioned being able to offer what you've put together as a server, right? So team members outside of SRE can actually start to execute their own projects, correct?
Yeah, we have a number of DevOps teams that are in our same organization that we haven't had a chance to partner with so much because we've been heavily embedded with these legacy core processing engines that I mentioned. But we're now with AAP up and running, we're able to offer it as a service and say, hey, what can we help you automate? What can we show you how to do? We can segregate their part of AAP, right, through making them their own team and let them loose and try things out in non-production and help them go to production. So yeah, as we take on this platform engineering role, AAP is one of our key components of how we're going to do that, and event-driven automation is one of the big features that we have teams asking us for, so we're looking forward to it.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's been great working with you, and it's been great chatting and understanding what you and the team are doing at Ticketmaster and kind of the impact. And obviously, when you were working through with the initial offering, we appreciate the collaboration that you've not just had within your team, but with Red Hat and our team as well. I think we're seeing, we're excited to see where you go next. Really excited to be able to come back in 6 months and see what you've really done with event-driven automation, how automation mesh has kind of helped not just touch those environments, but really scale that automation out across all of your regions. So really appreciate all of that. That's a great story. I think I kind of start to kind of wrap this up. I think there were a couple key points I think that stood out to me, right? I think getting started, the sharing, the communication, the collaboration across the different teams, right? Yeah. So being able to, I think, fundamentally from an Ansible perspective, right? Being able to collaborate and use the same common language with it to speak for each of the different domains, right? That have to work together in that end-to-end service delivery, right? Because you're not just the server guy, right?
Right.
You're the infrastructure guy, you're the cloud guy, you're you have different teams you have to interact to do that end-to-end service delivery. So I think, a lot of customers, obviously they're choosing Ansible for just some of those reasons. One, increase the speed to allow you to do things faster. You saw some of the results, being able to take some of that provisioning time from, 3 days to down to an hour, and reduce the amount of people that needed to be involved to make that happen, because you're able to capture that subject matter expertise, right? And then consistency. I think consistency is probably critical for you guys, right?
For sure.
Especially compliance and...
Yeah, one of the things I love about Ansible modules is it kind of gives you a common YAML language that you just have to learn and read some documentation on, and you don't have to worry about the underlying APIs of whatever you're interacting with. So it gives you that consistent way to interact with your systems because of that standardization.
Yeah, and you're starting to take advantage of a lot of that certified content as well, right? Like, it kind of, I think you probably heard Satish talk about force multiplier, right? Like, you're able to now capture expertise that you don't necessarily have to have in-house, like how to do Palo Alto, how to do Cisco, how to do some of these other technologies that, it's embedded in the collections, right? Yep. So I think, Jeff and the team, they looked at, you talked about budget, right? Being able, how do I procure it, right? We give you a lot of options, right? Ansible has a ton of options for you on how you can actually deploy and align it with your organization and your business model, right? You can deploy it yourself on-prem, you can deploy it in the cloud, you run it on RHEL, you can run it as an operator on OpenShift. What Ticketmaster took advantage of was our marketplace offering on AWS. As customer deployed, it's self-managed. We have offerings on Google Cloud in the marketplace. We have multiple offerings on Azure as well, both from a managed application perspective and, again, self-managed options. And if you're using either ROSA as a managed OpenShift platform, you can run Ansible on that, and you can also run it on ARO. So what we're trying to do is help you as customers really try to, be flexible and meet you guys where you are and how you want to actually run and deploy. Where's your center of gravity for deploying your automation, your management tooling? If you're moving to cloud, a lot of our customers want to be in the cloud with their management tooling where their workloads are going. And so we give you that. We're trying to give you that flexibility so that you're not tied into a particular deployment model. And obviously with the marketplace, kind of talked about, right? It's running in your cloud. It has all of the certified collections that you have available because it's a full Ansible automation platform. It's supported by Red Hat, so premium support. I think that was a big benefit, right? That you guys were looking for. To how do you mentioned that you've got all those pieces, parts. When something goes down, how do you get that support?
Exactly.
Right? Integrated into the billing, right? I guess that was a big piece, right? That procurement process, simplified it through the marketplace because that relationship was already set, and it counts toward the committed spend agreements if you have those. So we're seeing this across a lot of our customers. These are the types of things that they're looking for from the marketplace perspective. So that's why we started rolling these offerings out in the hyperscalers. Now, if you want to learn about Ansible, learn more about cloud automation. If you're doing cloud, we have all of the Ansible automation labs. There's a lot of labs here at the event, so we really invite you to take advantage of those labs. We have a lot of resources, training available, et cetera. So feel free, go to these sites and take advantage of them. Both take advantage of the free learning through the Instruct Lab stuff that we have, as well as our formal training and then workshops. Our teams can come out and do full workshops with your teams. If you've got specific use cases, they can work through those and help you guys out. And from there, I think we want to open it up for questions. If anybody has questions, we have a mic up here. If you have a question and want to ask Jeff anything in particular, or us, any questions? Yeah, you can just walk right up to the...
I was just curious, I don't know if this is going to the room, but, oh, there we go. From an SRE perspective, I'm an SRE at PlayStation. How has AAP impacted SRE operations? Is it a part of incident management? Is it observable to you so you can track things back to a playbook run? Yeah,
it is. It's really helped in that regards of one of the teams we have does. It was on one of the slides, but I didn't mention it. They do management of client databases, 1,500 of them, all sorts of stuff that's very much tied to our release cycles and upgrades on these databases and things. And they report heavily. also right out of the API, or they also, in some cases, have written their own queries directly to the database to pull data. So there's a great audit trail there. The logins for the users are tied to their Active Directory account, so you know exactly who's running what, when. So the audit trail is real strong.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions?
What do you use for secrets management?
We use, so Ansible Vault is built into the product. So we use that, and in some cases we integrate with HashiCorp Vault for some secrets that then get pulled in at runtime by certain playbooks that are rotating, like secret IDs on infrastructure, things like that.
Is there
Question?
any rhyme and reason as to why you might put something in Vault or in AAP?
Good question. I'm trying to think how we ended up with both. I'll think about it, and if I'll answer that later. But the credentials that are in Vault are, I think they're in Vault because we want users to be able to get to them too, and with Ansible Vault you can't do that. I think that was the reason. Yeah.
Did the SRE team start with you?
Yeah.
Or so there was no pre-existing team?
Just operations and engineering, and then I was the first SRE hire in our area, and kind of started asking questions.
For your configuration management, how did you track drift and report on it?
That's a good question. We've got scheduled jobs that we didn't do a good job of it at first, actually. We did this project and we got way into it, and we ran the config playbooks to test them out and do initial deployments, and then it was actually a SOX audit that came around, and we're like, oh crap, the audit's coming up, we haven't run the playbooks. So we had a big gap there for months, and we had to kind of push pause on what we were doing and get the schedules set up. So AAP will give you scheduled jobs that you can run, and we set them all up to run through our non-prod and pre-prod environments first to make sure they're good to go. All of the patching that's coming along with our config management is safe, and then it goes into production automatically. So by doing that, then you're able to watch the configuration drift, and we have our pre-production environment where we're keeping it as close to prod as possible, where we can catch some of those drifts.
Did you track it by each item that you changed on it and how things changed? Or was it more tracking the job success?
Yeah, it would just, in this case, we were tracking the job success, but then we keep an eye on what's being changed in the output. We don't have an automated way that we're doing it yet. Drift hasn't been a big problem on the particular systems we're working on, but if it became a problem, like sometimes there's an engineer who likes to go out and do stuff, right? Then you definitely have options, right, to track that more specifically on what's being changed.
I think it's some of the goals, right, ultimately is, structured, repeatable, consistent configuration and automation, kind of that culture and how you're doing that, right? You kind of start to slowly eliminate those pockets of drift because you're doing everything in a standardized, expected way, right?
Yeah, you'll hear me on a stand-up every once in a while saying, you got to get it, I'm glad you fixed it, you got to get it checked in. Is it checked in? Well, you're not done. You can't mark that JIRA as done, it's not checked in. So that's the cultural change that it takes to centralize automation, though, is to find, people are so used to doing things like that, and they're great engineers, and they fix things real fast, but it comes back to bite you in 2 months, right, when you have that drift. And so it's a cultural change, and then you can use automation to address it too.
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. If there's no more questions, thank you. Appreciate you being here. We're at the booth. If you want to see some of the stuff in action, you want to see EDA in action, you want to see automation mesh or some of the newer capabilities that we've been talking about, Ansible Lightspeed, et cetera, feel free, come to the booth. We have a bunch of experts there. We have a lot of labs, so hopefully you're able to get in and exercise some of the labs while you're here with some of our subject matter experts. We got a full team here at your disposal. So look forward to seeing you, and come by the booth, chat. If you have additional questions, let us know. Thank you.
Thanks.